Good morning. Welcome to the next in our webinar series with Relab. My name is Lou Donnelly-Davey. I'm just going to bring my guest today up on stage. There he is. Bring David up on stage and then we shall get straight into it. David, just pop me a message if you can't get in. Here he comes.
How are you?
Fantastic. Hey, David. Good. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you well.
Perfect, and we can hear and we can see you, and that is the main thing. So today I'm joined by my amazing guest. We're super privileged to have David Palfreyman. Am I saying that correctly,
David?
David?
Saying it like my mother. My mum and dad say it differently. Oh. I don't even know how I say it. David Palfreyman.
Okay.
Nice to see you.
There we go. There we go. Hi, Jake. How are you? Nice to see you there. So today we're going to be talking about David's, I will introduce him properly in a second, but David's an exceptional real estate coach amongst many other arrows to his bow. We're going to be talking about market dynamics in motivating buyers and sellers and building successful agent-client relationships, especially in this tough market. Before we jump into some questions, and we're going to flow quite freely in this webinar today. David's got a lot of incredible knowledge to share with us, so we won't be too dictated by our questions, but we will sort of lead on with them. So I'll just introduce David properly. Got quite the bio, David, so I'll make sure that I cover some of it because a lot of it's incredibly relevant to what we're going to be talking about today. So David has nearly 2 decades of experience in the real estate industry, starting out as an agent and securing a top 10 ranking spot at a very, very young age. He also experienced a full property cycle, so both massive growth and then retreat. So he understands a thing or two about both sides of the coin, and that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. He then moved on to be a trainer at Barfoot and Thompson in Auckland, and eventually leading his own team in Green Lane, where he achieved a top 3 ranking amongst 70 branches. So that's quite the milestone. David's a trusted property expert and offers personalised coaching and training programs to individuals and teams to help them achieve their goals. He's known for his engaging and motivating coaching style, which combines extensive knowledge of real estate and a deep understanding of human psychology, and that's what we're going to be diving into today. In addition to his coaching work, he's a respected speaker, author and commentator on the real estate industry, as well as an auctioneer. He is a very busy man. He's a regular contributor to industry publications and events and is highly regarded, and we are so privileged to have you here. So thank you very much for joining us,
nice
David.
To be here.
That's quite the mouthful.
Thanks for the intro, Louise. Much nicer having you do it than me.
Welcome.
But it's great to be here. And
of course.
You are right. I think 2 very important things, given the current time and climate, having sold through a cycle, I got a lot of empathy for what is happening in the marketplace, actually not only as a salesperson, but also as a property owner. And alongside that, as an auctioneer, I'm still having, and in fact, I have those real conversations with both buyers and sellers at the point in the end of the transaction all the time. So, yeah, as far as some context,
yes.
yeah, very relevant, and looking forward to helping out however I can.
Oh, brilliant. I see we've got quite the team here ready and waiting to hear all of your advice.
Hey,
so
Tony,
let's get cracking in. So let's start.
That's quite cool to get us in the chat. Nice to see you.
Fantastic. We do actually have a heck of a lot of Barfoot and Thompson, Harcourts, Ray White, Baileys. We've got the full spectrum here today. So let's start off. Current trends in the current market. We all pretty much know that, but let's start there and how they're affecting buyers and sellers at the moment.
I think it's definitely both marketplace and property specific, in the sense that not all markets have been affected in the same way. I think some are lagging behind and some had some different dynamics to begin with. But I think we can safely say, by and large, just about anywhere that you're tuning in the country, the market has gone from a very unbalanced in the favour of the seller to it's certainly tipped in favour of the buyer. And just depending on exactly what it is that you're selling and where you are selling, just how much that is tipped. But I think the common thread there will just be how quickly it's changed. So if you were a salesperson selling through 2020, 2021, then catching into 2022 and 2023 will have been very abrupt. And exactly when that changed in your marketplace will be depending on your market. But that is something that I think we firstly just need to recognise. And if you're a salesperson and you're feeling disgruntled or disappointed, that's very understandable. A lot of you will have gone through those feelings and now on the other side of it. It's almost like the grieving process. And I say that slightly tongue-in-cheek, but also I think it's really important to recognise that actually these are forces outside of our control. I think real estate agents often they like to pat themselves on the back for the job that they've done. And in fact, they should be patting themselves on the back for the job that they've done, but it hasn't always been them patting themselves on the back. What I mean by that is agents often get things wrong, like prices, for example. And if we were to look back into a really rapid growth cycle, agents were getting the price wrong all the time. However, the reinforcement from external environment was congratulations, because they asked for the seller. And actually the same thing has been happening. Hand on heart, agents doing the best that they can to appraise a property, looking in the rear vision mirror, having some confidence at a certain level, and then just being like, I was sure I could get that, and not having been able to do so. I think they sometimes unfairly shoulder some blame, certainly from sellers, and often from themselves, when I think it's quite important to just take a step back and look at what's actually happening in the market, what factors can we control, what factors can we not. We can always control our own actions, but we can't control others. And I think that's a big part of it. Alongside that, the good news is that, and I'm sure we'll delve into some of these things, there are a lot of things that you can do to get better results out of the market for you and your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really important factor, and we've talked about this in many webinars prior, that agents having a full understanding of the economic landscape, political landscape, market landscape, industry, where technology's at, all of the above, is a really important factor when they're dealing with both buyers and sellers and setting expectations. And they can provide that true value to their buyers and sellers when they do understand where we're at in the property cycle, but also some of those other external forces. And so you're bang on there, David. So how do you advise agents to tap into the motivation of buyers and sellers in this market, and what strategies can they use now to help achieve their goals?
There's a lot to this question, actually. So please keep bringing me back to the critical elements from your perspective. But the first thing that strikes me is that because of a fundamental misalignment with a lot of owners to the market, and what I mean by that is I think it's important to recognize that if you're listening to the media, you'd be crazy to sell right now. However, that's only relative to a cycle, right? It totally ignores the opportunity on the other side if you are freeing those funds up to do something else with it. And I think that's really important for agents to remember that as well, because we often fixate on the sale. So I'm talking to the seller side to start with here. And so I think it's really important to understand their overall objectives, because you can actually really help them, and also potentially speed up that process of understanding where the market is, both for them and where they're going to. So I think, using things, and actually obviously Relab offers great tools to do that. I also really enjoy the Ryan Stats portal, so you can actually see market trends and those kinds of things. But being able to speak confidently to the overall trends to a specific market, rather than just speaking to the market at large, is quite powerful, and it helps them to understand, because it's, particularly an example of this would be, I had a situation with a negotiation recently at an auction, and they already had a commitment to purchase elsewhere. They were moving out of the area, and we're sitting there negotiating, and they had higher hopes for the sale price than where we were landing. And we were we pushed the buyer to where we felt comfortable was a walkaway point, and there was still a gap for them to be able to achieve what they wanted on the other side. But simply having an agent who tapped into understanding the dynamic of that marketplace, we were able to trim some fat, if you like, from the purchase, actually to a number that was significantly more than the numbers that we were still trying to get from the buyer, and the net result was a better result for their client. So I think in deal making, it's important to understand the bigger picture, and that's where we can, as salespeople and advisors to our clients, we can help to add value through that process. Some other parts to that, I think it's important to recognise that owners often look at a perceived value, a paper value. They might have been jumping on a website and getting a sniff of how much their house was worth, but there was never a realised gain. It was only ever on paper, but it still feels like a real loss for people. And in fact, I reference a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, I think it is. They're researchers, and their research was put into a long format nonfiction, but fantastic read. It's heavy, there's some great stuff in it. And one of the points to that is the dynamic that occurs both the greed and fear of loss. And actually, we weight in decision making loss twice as heavily as we do gain. So whilst you can absolutely beat the greed, people are really struggling with the idea of this perceived loss. I think it's important to actually point out that it is a perceived loss and actually look at the bigger picture with it and helping a seller to evaluate the picture. And another thing which I think is just so important, and it's one of the things that I really like about auction. I'm sure there are other ways that you can do this with different sales methods, and I ask you to make your own translation here, but I'm going to talk specifically to auction because it's something that I'm doing all the time, is that you do have a wonderful opportunity with an auction campaign where you don't have to make a decision on price on day one in terms of the seller. They may have an opinion or a goal, and it may even be validated by recent sales stats. However, when we actually engage with the market, an agent who is running a very professional campaign is basically saying to the marketplace, here's what's on offer. And they're doing the best to speak to the purchasers that are likely to actually want to buy that property. We're catching all the potential interest. And of course, you have a variance of level of motivation and perception of value from those buyers. But we're actually saying, welcome one, welcome all, and doing the best to get them there. And I coach salespeople, rather than engaging on price, avoid price because we just don't know what the seller will take. And also, we just don't know what the buyer really thinks. So we're better to sell the property and, I think importantly, highlight the vendor's motivation. And I think it's fair to say that most of the vendors that are taking their properties to auction have a genuine reason for sale, which is why they're selecting a process which gives them a speedier result and a greater chance of a sale. And that resonates with the buyers. And it's why we're seeing often greater interest in those auction campaigns. Then we get chances over that campaign to present the feedback. And I think it's important to call a spade a spade. I think you're going to get 2, possibly 3 types of feedback through a campaign. You're going to get buyer feedback from buyers who want to purchase the property. And their feedback, and I'll tell this to an owner, I think it's true, that those buyers will often give numbers that are a little bit lower than what they would actually pay. Because there's 2 dynamics. Of course. People will always pay a little bit more than they expect to pay, but also they're hoping to actually condition the vendor and try and get it at a cheaper price. So they're giving these lower numbers. Right?
Get a deal.
So I'll go.
It's human behavior, isn't it? You want to get a deal.
So I think it's important to recognize we've got buyer feedback from buyers who want to buy it, and our hunch is that we might be able to get you a little bit more from those buyers, especially under competition. But then on the flip side of it, I think it's really important to get feedback from the buyers who do not want to buy it. And the dynamic that exists there can be quite interesting because there's a fundamental difference about value, right, versus what someone is willing to pay. And my suggestion to agents is, rather than saying, hey, what do you think it's worth, is actually they just said to you, look, we're not interested in it because the floor plan is really naff, or actually there's actually quite a bit of work that needs to be done here. Okay, fair enough, fair dues, you're not interested in it. But can I ask, if the price is right, would you want to own it? I think that salesmanship to just check and see if they are genuinely still interested. And I think sometimes we eliminate buyers because they think, the vendors are going to want X amount of dollars for it. We won't bother. But no one is going to buy a property that they don't actually want to buy, because it is an opportunity cost. If they put their funds into that property, even if it's a good buy, they can't buy something that they really want. So we have to accept buyers will only ever buy something they actually want. And then we may as well ask them. So if we can get buyers there, even at a price that they think might be cheeky, we'd rather have them there to stimulate competition, and you just never know what an owner's going to do. And secondly, if they do say to you at that point, no, it's not for us, hey, I appreciate that. Can I ask, I know that, but if you were to buy it, what would you pay? Try and get some feedback that has some resonance. Generally speaking, though, I still think that, and I think, say this to your owners, the buyers who don't want to buy the property, they're saying things like, for the example, right, the floor plan's a bit naff and there's a bit more work to do than we'd anticipated. They're hallucinating. Well, someone else is not going to care about that floor plan. It might suit them fine. And maybe someone else has got the time to spend a bit of time, but they won't mind that. So someone else will probably pay X. And so I think it's wise to say.
Oh, we've just lost David. He was on a roll there. There he is, and he's back. Ooh.
That's all right.
Yep.
Yeah, well, we'll just pick up where we left off. I think it's wise to say to sellers that the feedback from the buyers who don't want to buy it will sometimes come in higher than what the market is actually willing to pay, because those are from people who didn't like it for one reason or another and think that someone else won't mind. So that's to me a very transparent conversation with a seller about how to understand buyer feedback in order to have their finger on the pulse and make a wise decision when it comes to actually dealing with the buyer or the buyers. And the advantage I see of that, as opposed to just immediately putting a price on it on day one, or taking it through by negotiation or private treaty, whatever, effectively you do buy yourself some time to make sure the owner has alignment with the market. And once they have an understanding of the market, they're in a better position to make an educated decision about what price to release their property.
Yeah, absolutely. And, listening to various economists and commentators in the market recently, especially in light of the new cash rate and everything that's going on in the economy, one important point that we're picking up is that people won't wait forever. Like you say, they have a job in another city, they're downsizing, a child's gone off to school, something happens in a relationship. People may wait 3, 4, 6 months, but there does come a point where people do have to make a decision and accept market conditions. And like you say, what will you do with that money, no matter what sort of level that money is now? And, the commentators are saying, we're getting to the point now where hopefully we're not going to move in the cash rate again, touch wood. There's certainty in the market. We kind of know where interest rates are going to sort of lay in the next sort of 12 or 18 months. And people are getting to the point now where they have to make those decisions, which brings me to my next question. The next 12 or 18 months. Now, we've touched a little bit on Reserve Bank, and we've touched a little bit on interest rates and what have you. How do you see the property market evolving in the next 12 or 18 months? And what are the implications for real estate agents?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. I think number one, and I learned this lesson in the growth phase of my early sales career, is we just don't know what the market's going to do. So I think it's quite important. We really, nobody does. In fact, I read a great article by Tony Alexander just recently with a whole lot of reasons why we can go back in 18 months time and say, well, hey, here's why I was wrong. Because no one can have any real certainty about exactly what's going to happen. However,
they do say that economists are right 50% of the time. So
yeah, that's probably, I don't know how the track record would stand up against weather forecasters, but the interesting thing with this is that as salespeople, and I would put myself in the same category. I'm not a trained economist by any stretch of the imagination, but because of the sector I operate in, I pay real interest and try to understand and grapple with the factors that influence economists to make opinions, right? And I'm very lucky to have spoken with those economists. In fact, I got to say, I love talking with Tony Alexander. Sharon Zollner is another one that I really enjoy having a conversation with, and being able to sort of test your assumptions with a really good person like that helps you to sharpen your own perspective. And short of actually having those conversations, listening to what they say and making your own judgment on, yes, that makes sense, or no, it doesn't, and here's my opinion. It helps you to be a better person to engage with when you're having those conversations with buyers and sellers. And I often think it's interesting about, I can't remember the old fable. It's like an Aesop's fable, and the character is struggling to have any time of day for the person that can blow on his hands to warm them up, but also blow on his porridge to cool it down. But I actually think it's interesting that we can tell the truth to both sides in a transaction and still be a catalyst. Yes. And I think, I see real estate agents' role as being a catalyst. In fact, if I was to try and espouse my philosophy of real estate, it would be, basically, we should help people to make decisions that are in their best interest as quickly as possible. We get paid when they make their decisions, so that's good for us. And if we genuinely help them to make good decisions, that is a very good sustainable business practice. It goes around and around and again, and that's where you start to get that compounding effect in market. So back to the points with economy. I think if you really want to distill this thing down as simply as possible, I reckon economists tend to miss, purely because they've got so many trees in their forest, the importance of interest rates and house prices. So my experience tells me, and who knows, obviously you can't judge the future performance of a market solely on what it's done in the past, but I see a very direct and inverse relationship between interest rates and property prices.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
I use that dialogue with a buyer or seller. I see a very direct inverse relationship between property prices and interest rates. And so off that, we can kind of go a little bit deeper in the current environment. This cycle is different than other cycles because the interest rates are high because the Reserve Bank has a mandate to crush inflation. It should be sitting around 2%. I believe it needs to be between 1% and 3% is the remit. So where we're running it is too high. It has to come down. And if history tells us anything about inflation, once that genie is out of the bottle, it's much harder to put it back in and get it out.
Especially when we have things like cyclones and big government spend.
Totally. Now, there are some other factors that I don't understand as well as your trained economists, like the current account deficit, for example, which is going to influence our dollar and help exporters, etc. But if we look purely at the interest rate itself, my hunch is, who knows where it goes. I really hope as a property owner and also for those making buy and selling decisions that we see some stability there, because that's what the Reserve Bank is indicating. I think those who are expecting interest rates to come backwards in the short term, like I'm hearing people talking about the end of 2023, I hope they're right, because it would be great for my mortgage. However, my hunch is it may be harder to actually curb this inflation than people think. So if you're talking with a seller who's saying, I think I might just wait for 6 months or 12 months because the market might be better then, I think it's wise to not criticize their opinion, but just you've got to challenge people's assumptions to help them either become stronger in their opinion, which is good for them, or consider the alternative, in which case you may really help them. And so obviously we don't know if that is true or not, but if you've got a seller who's saying that to you, I think you do need to challenge it. There's a great book called The Challenger Sale. It's well worth a read. It's a study of salespeople in large corporates that outperformed the market and their peers in GFC. So there's a lot of lessons to take from that in this current environment. But one of those is that there's a big difference between order takers and challengers. And challengers are comfortable to engage with a client like our sellers. And where they're talking about something, we know something from the data, we should actually say, because they may not be privy to this. So there's two elements here. One is closing the loop on this about the potentially, is it going to be better? I think it's wise to just say, hey, do you know why interest rates went up? Yes, of course, inflation. Okay, we see inflation curbing, but it's still in the sixes, I think. So it's a long way away from where it needs to be. You're making a bet that things are going to be better, and you've obviously got some real reasons to be moving. Otherwise, why would you be on the market right now? And is it worth delaying your plans for that? And this is a real question, especially when you're dealing with older people as well. They've got a limited runway. So the other point here, and I think this is a really interesting one, is particularly in regards to auctions, is that I think we need to be making recommendations to our clients that help them. And they're not always aware. Like I was in a marketplace just recently where they don't do a huge amount of auction, but I got the data from their business to better understand what's happening in their environment. Their auction success rate, and I would suggest that auction success rate should be judged at either a 42-day marker or a 92-day marker if you want to play with, a standard agency length, at least the amount you're allowed to retain them for. The multiple was 2. They were twice as likely to have sold that property if it was listed by an auction, where the salespeople in this team were not aware of that stat, and they were grappling with it, going, really? No, that can't be right. That can't be right. And the commentary was, but so many of them are passing in right now. And the important piece to understand is it's a catalyst that speeds up the process and helps vendors get alignment and also creates the opportunity for some strong competition. So I think those are the sort of things where the facts, you can respectfully engage with clients on both sides of the transaction to make sure that they've actually understood and potentially either reinforce their position or seek an alternative one.
And that's super interesting, which leads me on to, how do agents use data and analytics to understand market dynamics and make informed decisions? You've answered that mostly. But is there anything else you want to add on the
Can I,
data and
well, can I
analytics?
give you, like, so for example, with the auction scenario, you could say, would you agree that it would be potentially unfair to judge a 6-week process on a 15-minute moment? So I think you've got to go, what's the dynamic at play? So for example, with the buyer in this marketplace, which I think we're starting to see the green shoots in terms of a resurgence of activity. I think that largely we now have a slightly different environment than if we were to go back 6 weeks ago, before the OCR was kind of raised and the commentary was now at a level that we think will work. Basically, the buyers were already showing some confidence, but now I think people at least don't worry that they're going to buy and potentially lose 100K overnight.
Yes.
So with that, we see a bit of confidence coming back in, but we still have some buyers that are playing the picky game. And I think that is a very dangerous game as a buyer. And I'll tell you why. I think it's a great sort of story to share. And also to give you some empathy, if I take you back to the beginning of the conversation about that dynamic when we were patting ourselves on the back for the huge price we just got, more than we thought. I remember a brought forward auction. This buyer said to me, it came up and we were chatting. I knew they were the buyer because it was brought forward and agent introduced me. And I said, I really hope you get it. And they said, so do we. Is 13 your lucky number? And I said, matter of fact, it is. It's my birthday. And they said, oh, we hope so. I said, what do you mean? They said, well, we've missed out on 12 properties. I was just like, man, like that's wow, that's a hard road to be on. And I think that, totally. I think that's so important for a buyer to remember and recognize that by the time we are at the bottom of the bell curve, like I don't know where we sit, and I doubt there's a massive bounce. I think it's much more likely to reach a stable foundation. But the point being that if you are waiting to the end, if you're waiting to the bottom of the bell curve, I can tell you right now, because we're already seeing it, the really good properties or the ones that you really want to own, you're going to end up missing out on.
Indeed.
Now, in this market is the one market that I've ever seen where a buyer who finds a property they want, guess what? They can buy it.
Yeah, completely agree with you there. So how can agents identify and address concerns and fears of buyers and sellers and create trust?
Yeah, I think like an engagement in good faith on that same philosophy that I shared before. If you're coming from a perspective of wanting to help people to make good decisions, then I think that builds trust.
Yeah.
Another piece to the trust thing is people, you need to seek to understand before you seek to be understood.
Yeah.
It's a cliche, but it's so true.
It's Stephen Covey.
I think so. I wish I could attribute it accurately. I've heard it from so many people. That's why it's a cliche, and now I'm saying it. But the reason it's there is because it's true. And so by simply taking a more consultative approach and a little bit of time and care to understand the situation, you have a much better chance of making wise recommendations or highlighting appropriate information. But just the effect for that seller or buyer is that they feel rapport. Now, we always think of rapport as a social dynamic. Hey, we both love boating or whatever. That is true, and I encourage you to build rapport. But when you develop professional rapport around their situation, they're going to trust your recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've talked about that quite a bit. I have a dog.
I think agents always like to have some scripts and dialogues, and I'll give you what I think is a really important one about this. For example, with a seller, I think it's worthwhile to ask them at the beginning of the conversations, how can I help?
Yeah.
Or, if it's clear that they're looking to potentially come to the market, can I ask, what are your expectations of your agent? Or what's important to you in your selection criteria? And by the way, sometimes sellers don't really know what they should be evaluating. I reckon the two common things that sellers often hang on to, because they're the most tangible elements of what is a very intangible service to try and pick. They'll go, well, how much can you get me and what's it going to cost me? I think as salespeople, we want to recognize those elements, but also be paying very special attention to the things that they are that are important to them. And I'd say number one that I notice, and it's sitting in the sales manager chair, just about any complaint that I fielded, stemmed from poor communication. So trust built through good, effective communication and a genuine intent to help people make good decisions, you're going to have a good business.
Yeah, completely agree. Sorry, just muting myself there because the dog's going mental outside and my husband's just off down the path to try and find her. Okay, let's change tack a little bit here.
But the kids are not playing video games today, so we should be okay on the connection.
No, I've got one in an exam, one's down at university doing a workshop on art, which is amazing, and one is studying for an exam for tomorrow. So they're all gainfully employed today. What advice do you give to agents to differentiate themselves from their competitors and stand out, especially right now?
Great question. It's funny because I've got two immediate thoughts that spring to mind. Number one is, real estate is a very established business. There's always little new nuances, but I chatted to someone who is a true entrepreneur in the sense that he's built some large businesses and sold them off. And he said to me, one of those businesses was related to real estate. And he said to me, it's so funny because real estate agents think they're these amazing entrepreneurs, but they're basically, no one's really doing anything new or different. And I thought about it and I was like, buzz off, mate. You don't know what you're talking about. But then I was trying to think about it and I was like, the reality is the most successful new agents that I see get in and do really well are the ones who do the fundamentals. They're back to basics and they understand those and they're willing enough to just go, I trust the people who come before me and I'll double down on the effort required to do those well. So I'd say number one is, whilst you want to be different, you are naturally different. So be yourself, but also don't try and be so different that you are trying to reinvent the business model, at least until you've really understood it. And if you have a fundamental new way of doing it, please talk to me because I'd love to find out what you're talking about. But the big piece, I'm always looking at these things and I go, and I got a very clear business model in my mind. And I can showcase this and help people through coaching or training because there are some very consistent patterns in the business. I'd liken it to the analogy of a house, perhaps. Every house has a foundation. Some have a concrete pad, some have piles, some have retaining walls. There are some nuances to that. And the same thing, every house has a roof of some kind, but there's a lot of variance in that. You might have a hipped and gabled roof, or it could be mono-pitch, so I think you can start to build the points of difference in the way you do things, but you need to have a very good solid base, and that's pretty well established. And secondly to that, just remember that a point of difference is just that. It doesn't make you a point of better, or it certainly doesn't have to. And some of the most memorable points of difference, actually, first one that springs to my mind, Richard Jensen. I don't know if you're still floating around out there, mate. It would be great if you were on this. We could have a bit of a laugh, but I used to sell in Palmerston North, and Richard Jensen, the only ginger in real estate, how he marketed himself. And I mean, obviously being a ginger, he may have a difference of opinion on this, but I don't think being a ginger makes you any better or worse as a real estate agent, but it did make him different. I'm sure there's plenty of others there, but he was the only one marketing that fact. And another Tony at B&T actually was ex-fireman. And in fact, fire chief is well known in the community. And I remember seeing his DL card. It wasn't a DL, it was cut out in the shape of a fire hydrant. And those are the sort of things you can do to create memorability and difference, rather than just saying, I get you the best price, or I'm your local expert. Hey, if you're going to double down on that, really make yourself a local expert. Show photos of your, anyway.
We've got an agent here in Dunedin, and he puts himself on the back of all of the buses. Basically, it doesn't matter where you're in traffic; you'll be behind a bus and you'll be seeing his face. And he calls himself the fastest Indian in Dunedin, or something like that.
Yes, Ash Jetley. No, yes. I've seen it. That's another great one. Yeah, there you go. So I just want to say, kudos, Ash. That's memorable. That's different. That's getting talked about here. So well done, mate.
And it is, and I do remember it, and I did get something through.
Palmerston North, by the way, there's some good agents there. Oh, I'm sure that's where Ash is, by the way.
Oh, Dunedin. We get some things through the mail quite often. Then when something comes through from him, I look at it. I don't really look at anyone else's. So yeah, it is memorable. Technology and innovation. What should we all be doing to stay ahead?
Well, first caveat to this, and I think it's an important one because given that AI is being talked about so much right now, I think, man, we're so lucky to be in real estate. Two major factors. The heavy regulation that came in really differentiates what we do from a private seller, creates some consumer trust, and will make it very hard to replace us. Secondly, alongside that, I think the higher value the transaction, the higher touch that is expected from the consumer. And I think where it comes to real estate, and I've experienced this myself from doing a video market update, which, you know, I'm not sure which of your questions this best hangs in, but I think this is a great example of something that some agents really do understand their market very well, and you should see them in an appraisal. They're able to very helpfully give the client some great guidance. They could very easily, if they wanted to, and maybe they need a little bit of coaching with it, but they could very easily demonstrate that same market expertise at scale. Now, once again, in terms of, you know, technology disrupting, it's not really disrupting. It's just, for example, the way that I experienced that was literally just doing a Facebook Live. Now, for me, it was playing on my experience and skill in the sense that because I do this kind of thing professionally, I was able to do that more easily. But most agents are good communicators, and you don't have to be whatever look or anyone else. You just have to be yourself, because the key part with something like video, which I think is a technology which is not the buzzword technology right now, but it's still so underutilized. Plenty of agents do a video of the property, but you could be doing one on a question that you fielded that often comes up. You could be doing one about the nuances of your marketplace. You know, you hear Tony Alexander talking about the national market or the Auckland market. Why don't you talk about what's happening in Papakura? You know, like these are the opportunities for salespeople to differentiate themselves. We're not really doing anything that's rocket science here. We're actually talking about stuff we talk about every day, but just doing it at large scale. The effect is this. Consumer, they could type into ChatGPT and ask them this question, but when it comes to something as big and valuable as their property, they want to hear it from an expert or someone who knows their stuff. So where that technology, and let's go to ChatGPT, for example, it's very buzzword, but I tell you why, and I agree, I would say there are very few technologies that have happened like that have suddenly shifted things. You know, I would say in my lifetime, things like the mobile phone and the internet have dynamically changed life. And it happened quite rapidly, really, when you look at it, but it was kind of incremental. But I feel like my experience from talking to Oscar on Air New Zealand versus talking to ChatGPT, which happened overnight through the visible eye, was so different. So I think it's important for us to recognize that's a big shift. We're early in knowing exactly the best applications and the best interfaces specific to real estate. But I tell you what, very easy to use in terms of if you're stuck trying to write an advert, boom, type in at least something about it and say, help me out with a couple of headline ideas. Boom. Now do it like Gavin Rubinstein. Boom. You know, this kind of stuff. Have some fun with it and stimulate that creative process. If you're writing clauses, especially if you've got the paid version, chances are they're going to do as good a job, if not better than you. You just need to understand the variables to write that, put the right information in, and you do have to have enough knowledge yourself to be able to look at it and go, that's about right, or no, this is off track.
And that's a super important one too. You know, I use ChatGPT for various things, but I only use it as a something to edit or aid, or maybe give me some starting headlines or something like that. But you do have to actually give it a lot of information. You have to know what you're talking about first. You have to keep prompting and keep refining to get the product that is usable. And there also was a case, I think it was last week or the week before, of a lawyer that used ChatGPT, and ChatGPT actually made up some case law completely, and it's called hallucinations. And
exactly.
They call it creative, completely made it up, and he got in a lot of trouble. So you do have to be super careful, and you know, you pick your battles. But certainly for things like listing descriptions, where you're kind of stuck and you've written your own and you want a little bit more flavor, or like you say, you could maybe write this in the tone of Tom Panos or something. You know, definitely can sort of help you out here. Hey, we're just
one other little thing I'll say to this, and it would be fascinating. Hey, if anyone's watching this and is more not so much they might be a salesperson, but someone in this more technology space who's actually got some ideas on this. I got some pretty clear ideas on how this could be implemented well. And here's some free ideas. And if you're more interested, please talk to me, because I'm curious and I'd love a business partnership. Basically, I think that, you know, imagine a great plugin with this. into your email inbox that understands how to screen inquiries on listings, that can output, maybe using some Python or something directly into putting it exactly where you want with that inquiry. So you've got it logged how you want it in your CRM, plus an intelligent response back based on the parameters that you've given it about how to answer the price question or how to answer the whatever common question you're going to get about that listing. Great time saver. And that's just where you have to obviously have quality control and confidence that you've got it right. So there's some testing required, but I don't think we're far away from seeing that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's multiple plugins available and more every single day. And we're certainly doing some pretty cool things with AI here at Relab that you'll all see very, very soon, in a couple of weeks, in fact. It's just that next level. And, we've got an amazing CTO here, Leon, and gosh, he's incredibly smart when it comes to this sort of thing, and he's working on some really exciting things. So do stay tuned, and we can continue talking about that. Yeah, no, it's going to be very exciting. Okay, we're just coming up. We've got a few more minutes left. So if you've got questions, please pop them in the chat. And we're just going to do one or two more quick questions. What are the most common mistakes real estate agents make, and how can they avoid them?
Man, it's so open slather.
Yeah.
First thing here I'd say is that, especially coming back to that thing, I think it's easy. Salespeople often misappropriate activity. And sure, if you've got momentum up and you've got a lot of input stuff coming in, great, the phone's ringing. And when I say phone, I want to make it crystal clear. Phone, take it as it could be whatever the method of communication you're choosing, right? But the principle is, if the phone's not ringing, you can make it ring. Pick it up and dial, whatever that means to you, right? And I think the salespeople that their activity levels have dropped because the activity in the marketplace has dropped, then they've dropped. They used to be having 30 people through an open home, and that was getting them in front of a lot of people. But if that's dropped, then you have the opportunity to pick it back up again and do it. So I think a mistake in the current market is just to be reactionary rather than proactive with that. And if the market activity is dropped by 30%, if you lift your activity by 30%, you'll be a statistic anomaly. Another mistake I see, and this I'm speaking to all of you auction agents out there, some of you will be going here, and others will maybe have a difference of opinion. But I think a real mistake in this market, if you've wondered why your buyer is ghosting you all of a sudden, I remind you of the dating scene. Maybe you were messaging that person, and all of a sudden they stopped. You're like, oh, they're ghosting me. Do you think they were seeing other people? Well, I don't know in that situation. Real estate context, yes, they are.
Of course they were. Of course they are.
They are. There's opportunity out there, and they're trying to figure out which one do we go for. Buyers want to know the price. Why? So they can find a reason not to buy. Our job, sell them the property, get them attached to it, and then put them in a competitive situation where we can push them higher or negotiate, telling them about the fear of the conditional buyers, whatever, right? But the key part here is I'd say you need to be quite cautious about talking buyers up, get them to paper first, and then engage them in that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just coming up time. So I've got one question there from Jake. David, in a tough market, what other ways can we measure success to stay motivated? Yeah, so when we're not seeing those numbers roll in like the good old days, how can we stay motivated? What are some other metrics we can use?
Yeah, love it. So I think let's talk emotionally, because I think that really affects our energy. So just to recognize with the dynamic we talked about before, agents were always getting price wrong in the growing market. They were wrong, but the pat on the back from the vendor and everyone's celebrating, it felt good. Now there's a risk that we're getting it wrong, but in the other direction, and it's all a bit downer, you need to have a good cohort of people around you that can you can share this journey. You need to it's a great advantage of being within a good team. Have those people that you're on the same journey with. You might be competitors in your office, but that opportunity for iron to sharpen iron and encourage each other is very real. Get a coach in your back. Obviously, I do some coaching, but I'm more focused on the training and auction side. But the reality here is, your manager could be that person, or you could find somebody else. It could even be someone that's not in real estate, but just to help you there, because it is a tough environment. And then the other things in terms of how do we measure success to the specifics of this, Jake, I think it's so important, doesn't matter which stage of the business you're at, to focus on some of the leading indicators or predictors of success. So I'd say in terms of building an asset base over the lifetime of your real estate sales business, it is your people. It's the people in your client base, your database, whatever you want to call it. So actually paying attention to that and watching that grow over time, I hope that that is something that makes you stay motivated, and it should, because if you look over time, maybe roughly 5.5% of properties sell per annum across a range of different markets. So if you've got 1,000 true fans, then that's a huge amount of business every year just from that client base. So then the other piece is, well, how do you measure the engagement with that client base? And I think there's a lot of different things you can do, but then the most important thing, we've touched on it before, and everyone talks about doing phone calls or whatever, but if you've got meaningful connection with people, that is not just with that person, it's with everyone else they know. So I would focus on, how many appointments did I make? And that can be buyers and sellers and just people that you're talking real estate with or life with, that you can have some influence with in that connection. So I'd say track your appointments, and then even further ahead of the curve with this is tracking the rate of those conversations. But as far as prospecting goes, I think the more accurate way is, we're looking to find people we can help. And if you're having a conversation that identifies somebody as someone you might be able to help, as simple as, hey, how's the house, is enough to potentially stimulate the fact you might be able to help them, or just paying attention to what people are saying, and using that and tracking those numbers, because we know that is future business. Some of it will happen sooner than you think, some of it will take longer, but if you've got a sustainable focus with this and you can reward those behaviors and recognize the importance and find the enjoyment, maybe even gamification in that, I hope that'll keep you stay motivated. One last thing on the motivation one, because I think it's so important. I had a chat with an agent just recently who was feeling, I think, depressed, and they're stretched too thin. They've got a lot of things on their plate and they're not seeing a way forward. If you cannot see a way forward, if you don't have hope for the future, get some help, please.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Look, it's tough out there, and it's tough. People are getting made redundant. It's not just in the real estate industry, so, you may have a partner at home that's been made redundant, school fees, food on the table, everything's harder, mortgages are now more expensive. That's a really important one. And, I encourage people.
There are business owners and I think in reality, salespeople are business owners as well, but I just think business owners have far greater overheads. It's not just real estate, but real estate's been heavily affected. Cash flow is a major one. I was chatting with a leading accountant the other day, and he's having these difficult conversations. And much like myself with the auctions, he has some real tools to offer those people to help them. However, they are not always what people want to hear. But sometimes it's what you need to hear. And I think that is the most important thing.
Yeah, it is. And, if you are struggling, reach out to someone, anybody. David, we're out of time. Gosh, thank you so much for joining us. Just as a bit of a wrap up, this will be emailed to everybody once it's processed. And David, you mentioned a book early on in the piece. I might just grab that off you, and we'll pop that link or the book description in the email as well.
Yeah, thinking fast and slow is when I talked about. That's the decision science, like what makes people make the decisions they do. And then the other one was The Challenger Sale. I forget the authors, sorry, but those are the two. And with good read.
We'll pop those in the email as well. Thanks so much for coming on, and enjoy your weekend, everybody. Hopefully it's going to be a nice, sunny and dry one.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for everyone who tuned in. Nice to, I didn't get to see you, but good to have you with us, and look forward to catching up soon. Cheers.
Great. Thanks, David. See ya. Bye.